Welcome to the All About You podcast. My name is Sheila and I am your host. In this podcast, I invite people to tell their stories of their travels, hobbies, and passions. These podcasts are also now available on my All About You YouTube channel. So if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story. Welcome to the All About You podcast. And I'm very excited to continue our round the world travels with Pier. And today we're off to Thailand. So Pier, welcome back and let's go travelling.
Thank you, Sheila. And today the podcast is about Thailand. So in November 1997, I started there, coming from Gabon, Thailand, or in the earlier days, before 1939, it was called Siam. A beautiful country. Its culture is really fascinating. It fascinated me so much that in my day-to-day, Thailand is in my thinking, in my doing, and that is more or less due to the Buddhism, the way how they live in Thailand. Buddhism is one of the pillars of the Thai society. Do you know that Thailand has never been brought under a European colonial domination?
Probably because they've got Buddhism and they have it all organised. They probably don't need it.
Well, if you look to all the countries around Thailand, so Malaysia, Singapore, British colony, then you had Cambodia, Vietnam, French colonies. They were all occupied, but dominated by Europeans, except Thailand.
Interesting.
That always had been on their own. Yeah. Well, not long after arriving in Bangkok, November, I was based in Bangkok. We had a national festival, Loy Krathong. What was that? Well, that took place on the day of the full moon in 12 lunar months, and it was on a Friday. I never forget it, the 14th of November 1997. What is the Krathong? What they have a lotus-shaped float made from a banana stem with folded banana leaves forming petals of the lotus. The float contains a candle and flowers. And in the evening, the people light the candle and set the float along the big river, the Chao Phraya, in Bangkok. But the rest of Thailand, they put it in their local rivers and canals. And this is as an offering to honor the goddess of water. And if you look over the river, then you see thousands and thousands of small flickering lights of those floating devices.
Wow, it must just look absolutely magical.
Not bigger than, say, 30 centimeters long, but beautiful.
Wow.
So that was our first impression of Thailand when we came there. And another, we talk about floating, another nice place to visit is the floating market. It is about 80 kilometers away, southwest of Bangkok. And the floating market is a commercial center and everything is happening on the water. So the small canoes, the small boats have their merchandise on the boats, and the people pass and move over there and there, buying and selling.
So the buying and selling from one boat to another.
Boat.
Yeah.
Very nice. And of course, Thailand has a big variety of beautiful orchids, and I love orchids. I find it amazing. You have to be patient. The orchids here, by the way, in Europe, they are all commercialized. Mm-hmm. You buy them for 7 or 10 euros and you have an orchid. And normally after that, not flowering anymore, they lost the flowers. Well, people throw them away. This is like the Christmas plant.
The Christmas trees or the Christmas flowers. Yeah, people have it just for a couple of weeks, then get rid of it.
But the wild orchids needs special treatment. Yeah. And there in Bangkok I had 3 balconies, and it was hanging full with orchids. And the orchids didn't have any soil or anything. It was just in a wooden small thing what was open, and there you saw all the roots coming out. You only had to take care that they didn't have too much sun, because an orchid
because the humidity in the water is enough for the plant. You don't need to have to water them because of the humid atmosphere.
Yeah, so the orchids were really nice. Another spectacular trip in Thailand was a train ride from Bangkok to Kanchanaburi. And that is done on the famous Death Railway. I don't know if you have heard about it. That is unbelievable. The Japanese, because Thailand was in the Second World War, Thailand was under occupation of the Japanese. And they wanted to have the supply to provide their armies. They needed to build a railway through Burma, Thailand, to Singapore in Malaysia. And that was done, that railway was made by the prisoners of war and the prisoners from Indonesia, Malaysia, captured by the Japanese. And they were working on that railway. That's why it is called the Death Railway.
So it was free labour.
Yeah.
And they didn't put much importance on the lives of the workers.
Yeah, and the beams of the railways, they say that every beam laid under the rails costed 1 life. Thailand had so many beautiful things. Nowadays it is more or less spoiled by the tourists, and that came after the Vietnam War. Because in the Vietnam War, the Americans used Thailand as their military base, and they spoiled a lot. But okay, but the main islands in the Gulf of Thailand, they are so beautiful. And you know, I'm an enthusiastic scuba diver at that time, so I visited many islands: Koh Samui, Koh Samet, Koh Chandi, Phi Phi, and most of the time I was diving with my daughter. My daughter was that time, she was born in Oman, but that time she was on boarding school in Holland. And then when she came over to visit me in my postings, we dived. Yeah, she came over and we dived many times. Now, one aspect in Thailand is the silk industry. The silk industry in Thailand was very famous, the same as in China. But over the centuries, the rise of the cotton industry more or less molested or died the silk industry, because silk industry is very labor intensive. And until there was an American man, his name was Jim Thompson. And he more or less revived that silk industry in the beginning of the 1900s. And his premises, consisting of authentic Thai houses and workshops made of teak wood, is worthwhile to visit. This man revived the silk industry, which is now well known, famous. And on one of his trips to Malaysia, he disappeared, and nobody knows where he went.
Nobody knows what happened. Oh, wow.
Nobody knows what happened. But the silk industry is at the moment a very famous and big industry. And of course, I took many silk material with me at home to Holland for my mother, because my mother loved needling and yeah.
So your mum did quite well out of all your journeys around the world, getting these beautiful silks and other fabrics from other countries that she probably wouldn't have been able to access if you weren't travelling.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, my mother was amazing, but that is another story.
That's another story. Let's not digress.
And the north of Thailand is also beautiful because there you have the mountains and you have there the two main rivers, the Chao Phrao, who more or less ends near Bangkok, and the other river is the Mekong River that is well known from the Vietnam War and that is ending in Vietnam. So the Chao Phrao River drains in the Gulf of Thailand, and the Mekong River is used as the border between Laos and Cambodia and ends in Vietnam. It is called the Golden Triangle due to
the drugs.
The drugs. And the drug business more or less came due to the war in Vietnam. The same with the prostitution in Bangkok. Before that time, it was not known. What you have in the north is the lacquer pottery is very famous. So they make from very thin wood, say lacquer. They make lacquer potteries. So layer after layer after layer, and then they make very nice figures in it and structures. And I still have in my collection a few items. It is more or less maroon, brown, red color.
So there are some traditional colours they use.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. I like the north very much, yeah. What is also very traditional in Thailand, especially in the early days, was the Thai porcelain. And they got it from China, but then they created their own methodology, the temperature and the substance, and that was called the benjarong. That is a traditional form of Thai porcelain. And the hand-painted places are usually decorated in a few colors only, with gold. And after there it is enameled with relief glaze. And from the 13th century, this was exclusively made for the royal court. When I was in Thailand, King Bhumibol was the king. And I jumped now, but I have to tell this about King Bhumibol. He is so, that time, praised and respected by the population that if you were walking there in a park or on the street at 6 o'clock in the evening, the music started, the national anthem, and everybody stood still.
Oh, everybody's respecting.
Yeah. When you went to the cinema, before the cinema, you got a film about King Bhumibol, what he all did for the people, the national anthem. You had to stand up.
And everyone's standing up in the cinema before the main film.
And then the main film started. Porcelain was especially made for the royal court. But now it is available for the tourists as well. So, of course, it was time to leave Thailand.
Right, so you've done your 3.5, 4 years, time to move again.
For my time in Thailand, I got such a benjarong pot, porcelain pot, beautiful, and it is in my collection.
It's in your travelling collection.
Yes.
So where are we off to next?
Well, this time not close by Thailand. We are going to Venezuela.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So Venezuela is our next destination for travel on the next podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe on whatever platform you are using. It is free, and if you would like to tell your story, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.